Chapter 6, King of the Hooligans. Carlton was about 6 years old when his dad took him to Upton Park to watch West Ham play. Perched on his shoulders, cheering on the lads for all he was worth. Marvellous, innocent childhood entertainment. Never did he ever dream that 10 years later, he'd be running amok on the terraces as one of the most feared soccer hooligans in Britain, targeted by the police, hated by rival fans, dreaded at every ground countrywide for the mayhem that he caused. I suppose he was first hooked on football, and especially West Ham, when he stood wide-eyed in Green Street, Forest Gate, after West Ham won the FA Cup in 1964, and watched the Hammers open-top bus drive through the cheering crowds on their victory parade. Carlton was up on his dad's shoulders for a better view of the conquering heroes, wearing West Ham's claret and blue scarf and waving a rattle and cheering away until he was hoarse. It was a magical day, and Dad could see he'd got the West Ham bug. He was a good boy, an ex-merchant seaman who'd been twice around the world. Then he worked as an electrician and been a fanatical West Ham fan all his life. He was thrilled when he showed all the signs of being an equally avid supporter. He was always pleased to take him along to home games, then to a few away matches, and Carlton absolutely loved it. They were like really good mates. He'd always be there to lift him over the turnstiles, hoist him up on his shoulders, and find him a good spot in front of the crowd where he'd get the best view of the game. His mum comes from Bermondsey, on the other side of the Thames, so her family always supported Millwall. So one week, Dad would take him to West Ham, the next to a Millwall home game, plenty of variation, no animosity. But as Carlton grew up and went on to grammar school, he couldn't support two teams. It wasn't done, especially two teams so close together. So he nailed his flag to the West Ham mast. His schoolboy passion for the team grew into an all-consuming obsession. Carlton lived, breathed, and dreamed West Ham United. He started to bunk off school to watch them. Then at 13 or 14, he joined up with a crowd who went to every game, home and away. At 16, he got to know the real hardcore supporters, including Vicky Dark, who became a well-known bank robber, and loads of other mates who not only shared a fixation with the Hammers, but a mania for violence. Sheer, pointless, exhibitionist violence was often seen on TV newsreels and condemned in Parliament. As impressionable teenagers, their big heroes were a hooligan gang known as the Mayhem firm. Blokes in their 20s, grown men to them, who would cause aggravation by running mob-handed into the rival supporters' end, fighting, getting arrested, chanting their signature tune, Mile End, Mile End. Carlton used to think, fucking hell, they're the business, they're the fucking chaps. Then another firm came along, the TBF, the Teddy Bunter firm, and they were just as crazy. He was in complete awe of them, and all he wanted to do was be as wild, as tough, and as feared as them. So they started their apprenticeship in football terror. He wanted his own firm to outshine all the others. They started doing little tests to prove their bottle to each other, like running single-handed into a crowd of 50 rival supporters and kicking off. It was a mega buzz. At 16 years of age, fit, tough and fanatical, Carlton set out to become the governor of the rowdiest bunch of soccer hooligans of all time, and that's how the inter-city firm of West Ham supporters was born. He wanted to be the boss. He wanted to be respected. He wanted to be feared. He can't pretend the violence didn't play a big part, because it did. Carlton wasn't a violent kid away from the football grounds. Not a skinhead or anything, always looking for trouble. But put him at a West Ham game and he became an animal. He played soccer himself. He loved all sport. He went out with girls, but it all took a backseat to his soccer mania and the thrill of conflicts. He was a soldier, a tough Marine, a commando, out there fighting for his team. He wanted the adulation of the fans. He wanted to be a name on the terraces, the Top Gun. Coventry, which was full of rival supporters, jumping up on a pool table, picking up the cues and hitting out, throwing the balls and fighting with everyone in there. They get through the turnstiles at places like Middlesbrough and Sheffield Wednesday and make a run for the fucking opposition end. They go in, about 30 or 40 of them, fist flying, kicking out, using koshes, and they'd be heroes. They get pulled out by the police and frog marched past the away supporters, and they'd all be cheering and clapping. The football was becoming unimportant. The violence was all consuming. Carlton was throwing out game after game, but his standing amongst the West Ham supporters was getting higher and higher. He was a somebody. West Ham weren't all that brilliant a lot at the time, so he didn't miss a lot when he got the red card. He thought that if they haven't got the best footballers, then at least they've got the best fighters. From random attacks and sporadic outbursts of violence, soccer hooliganism became more organised. It became part of their culture, big time. And it was attracting people from all walks of life. Not every hooligan is a brainless yobbo. Skilled people, professional people get a buzz too. Raids on rival fans become carefully planned. There was an underground network of contacts that kept you posted on what was going on. Firms were calling themselves names like the Headhunters and the Bushwhackers, and were all trying to outdo each other in the scale of violence. Their name, the Intercity firm, came about when they started to travel to away games via intercity expresses. They did this so they didn't have to go on the specially organised soccer specials, which were patrolled by the police, and you had to go wherever they said. They didn't want that. They wanted to be able to get off the train when they wanted, roam about the town, spring the element of surprise on the opposition and do the maximum amount of damage. A soap firm was doing a special travel offer at the time. 2 adults buy a ticket and 2 children go free. So they used to get the older people on the firm to act as the parents, and so the younger kids were only 14 or something. So they'd all chip in with the fare money, and so they were getting to away games really, really cheap. And the bonus was that they were able to steer clear of Wait and Old Bill at the other end and storm in like an invading army from any direction. Their numbers were growing all the time, 30, 40, 50. They were becoming a formidable firm. Then they sussed out the student rail cards and started using them to buy cheap tickets. They were travelling all over the country, as far as Liverpool and Newcastle, but the West Ham Bother Boys didn't yet have a big name up north. They set out to change all that. They wanted to be the best organised gang of soccer thugs in the country. His mate Brett came up with the Intercity name, just for a joke at first. He made up stickers with the Intercity logo scrawled on them, which they left everywhere. He said, "Congratulations, you just met the ICF." Then they had a couple of hours with the opposition and 2 of the geezers got knocked out. They left them on the deck with the ICF stickers on their heads. The name stuck. Their reputation grew for brutality and their balls grew and Carlton loved it. The papers picked up on it and soon they were front page news as the nastiest bunch of hooligans in Britain. But they had some serious opposition as rival firms tooled up with more and more dangerous weapons. On one raid up north to take on Newcastle's boldest, they arrived early and started on the booze in the home-sized local pub called the Magpies. They had a skinful by match time and they were fired up for trouble. They got in okay and were put in the away supporters' pen, segregated from the Geordies by a wire fence. It was an unbelievable atmosphere. All of a sudden, the Geordie boys started throwing darts and sharpened coins over at them. One dart went so close to Carlton, he felt it brush his ear. That onslaught was followed, to everyone's amazement, by a petrol bomb being lobbed through the air in their direction. It whooshed like Halley's Comet, a great ball of fire heading straight at them. Carlton didn't know how they got it in the ground, but now they got it coming their way. They were penned in pretty tight, but they all managed to dive out of the way. One West Ham lad didn't quite get clear and had his fucking corduroy trousers set alight. And 1 or 2 others got petrol burns. Nasty stuff by any standards. Carlton jumped on the screaming lad who was on fire and rolled him over and over to put out the flames. He was okay, luckily, but he could have been scarred for life. The railways and the law enforcement agencies, the police, the railway police, the club security staff, tried to stop them travelling away by making tickets first class only. So they travelled first class. It was that easy. From the trains altogether, they go by car or by coach, any way they could get there. They meet up in the Britannia Arms in Plaistow, their battle HQ on a Friday night, and hold a council of war to plan the next day's tactics. They had little hooligan platoons from all areas of East London, the Towners and snipers from Canning Town, the Chads from Chadwell Heath, the Brits, them lot from the Britannia, about 30 of them who did the planning. Everybody knew each other by name. Strangers weren't welcome. When you got on the train the next day, you knew exactly who was there. You knew they were safe. His ambition was always to be up front, leading the attacks, being mad, getting the big reputation. Carlton did crazy things to get recognition. He'd run into a hostile end on his own and have a Barney. Or he'd go in with a small select team and hurt a few people. They'd run through the crowd singing West Ham chants. A path would clear and people would point and shout and say, "There they are, the ICF." To him, it was like pop star adulation. On one visit to one of their arch enemies, Chelsea, he had been expecting the troops to be following him loyally into battle in the shed. But somehow, they didn't seem up for it. One by one, they were slipping off for a piss or buying a hamburger or getting a drink. By the time they got to the segregation fence, there was only one geezer behind him. It kicked off when the Chelsea boys saw that they were only two-handed. Suddenly, they're all trying to get him fucking digging and kicking and punching. Carlton thought, I've got to get the fuck out of here. His shirt was fucking ripped, his jeans pocket torn off, and the Chelsea mob were trying to drag him over the fence. Then some more of his boys turned up. They grabbed his legs, so there he was, stuck on the fence like a fucking giant Christmas cracker being pulled from both ends and about to explode. He got pulled over, then he got pulled back. This went on for about 5 minutes. He was getting really battered, and for the first time in his life, Carlton hoped that fucking old Bill would move in and nick him. At least then he'd be out of the tug-of-war nightmare. One last surge of strength and he made the leap back onto the West Ham side. The police were moving in fast, but the lads all smothered him so they couldn't see him, and he crept out the ground with his towel between his legs. As if it hadn't been shit enough day, he decided to get a bit of revenge when Carlton bumped into a mob of Chelsea boys later, and he smashed a few fittings. He was wrestling with a big Chelsea fan when a great big lanky West Ham lad charged in and tried to boot him with his Dr. Martens. He missed and kicked him right on the nose. It broke his nose. I mean, it hurt like fuck, and there was blood everywhere. He thought, this ain't my day. Time to go home. He walked through his front door. His missus looked at the black eyes, broken nose and bruises and said, "Nice day at the football, babe." Gradually, he became more and more fearless, testing himself at every match, seeing what he could get away with and stay in one piece. Sometimes Carlton got a kick in the bollocks, sometimes he got a good hiding, but all the time he was getting battle hardened and loving it. You've got to be able to take a good hiding as well as dish it out. He had his nose rearranged and he had been kicked in the face by Arsenal and Chelsea fans, stabbed in the back by Millwall fans, but all he wanted to do was get back into the fray the next week and get his revenge. It was 10 years of sheer madness. He knew football and football violence had consumed his life. He told his wife Karen before their wedding, "I'm sorry, babe, but soccer comes first." Carlton was totally obsessed. He couldn't even be in the same room as a rival supporter. If he was doing the door at a club and opposition supporters turned up, he'd have to do them. He hated everybody except West Ham fans. It was like a primeval hatred in him. Tribal instincts running riot. He'd had a fucking great West Ham tattoo done on his arm at Ringo's in Woolwich when he was living at mum and dad's. He was scared to let his mum see it and always wore long sleeve shirts. Then one night he came home pissed and fell on the floor. They got him undressed to put him in bed and she saw it. She went fucking ballistic, but he didn't care. West Ham was his life. That was his badge. The more the authorities tried to stop him getting to the games, the more ingenious ways they found to beat him. The simplest was their motors. They had a small fleet of cars between them, big Granadas, Mark I Lotus Cortinas, that sort of thing, so they could load them up with their firm and get anywhere they wanted. They'd pull out the back seats before they left and shovel a load of fucking pool cues and chair legs underneath, ready for use at the other end. They screwed the seats back down again, so if the old Bill stopped them, they wouldn't find anything that could be called an offensive weapon. They'd pull in at a service station near the ground and get tooled up. Sometimes you get several supporters coaches in the same fucking place, so it'd all kick off in the filling station. A nightmare if you just happened to be innocently pulling in for a couple of fucking gallons of 4-star. It was amazing what weapons they could produce, even when they'd been searched. The Sun newspaper, rolled up and folded the right way, makes a vicious little kosh. One of them had ammonia in a fountain pen, which was very nasty when it was squirted in your eyes. Nobody knew what had done the damage, and the pen was back in the pocket, looking as innocent as a ballpen biro. Hooliganism was spiralling out of control. It was getting really, really nasty, really spiteful. Soccer fans were loathed the world over. England's fans were seen as the shame of the nations. Politicians started calling for tougher penalties to wipe out this menace. But no one could understand the obsession, except the hooligans themselves. Carlton missed only about 6 games in 10 years. He wouldn't even go on holiday in case he missed a West Ham game. It ruled his life. He became addicted to violence. He remembered one weekend they borrowed a van belonging to a pop group for whom a mate of his was a roadie and drove up to a Sunderland game. They left on a Friday night with a mattress in the back to sleep on and drove to Coventry. There was about 20 of them packed in there and they all steamed into a local nightclub and got fucking pissed up. It kicked off inside and they had a right decent punch up. Then they drove on to Sunderland through the night and got there at about 6 a.m. in the morning. Most of them sleeping in the back. They stopped at a service station for breakfast, then moved on to a pub. They came back and found the vans completely smashed up. Trouble beckons. They had a ruck at the game after the police hadn't bothered to put any officers on the other side of the gates and they could run anywhere. Some of them up the front of the attack wore opposition scarves to fool the security and get amongst the enemy, something they'd done successfully at Chelsea matches. Afterwards, they stopped off at Doncaster on the way back and 4 coaches of Newcastle fans stopped. They were in the pub 20-handed and they heard, "You cockney bastards." And all of a sudden, all the windows come through. There were bricks and glass everywhere and the owner was trying to stop people getting in. The Geordies had just happened to stop off for a beer on their way back from another game and they got another war. They went outside and headed for the van. They could hear the Geordies shouting, "Where are all the cockney c***s? Let's get them." Him and his pal were at the back of their battered van with just a penknife to defend themselves and Carlton said, "Fucking hell, we're going to get caught here." Then the rest of the fucking West Ham boys appeared like the cavalry and they got another ruck going, another crazy weekend for the inner city firm. They left on a Friday night and got back on a Sunday, still in the same clothes, black eyes, cuts and bruises, but you just got yourself scrubbed up, changed your gear and got ready for the next round. Carlton even sold his record collection, his clothes, anything he had to get the money together to get to the next game. He cut household spending to a minimum, went on cheap holidays to save for his football money. It cost him every penny week after week. It was like a total addiction. Crazy really, because there was no financial return on anything they did. He didn't say that what he did was right, but West Ham flowed through his veins. He was training as a marine engineer at the Royal Albert Docks at the start of this soccer madness. He needed more than that. His reputation on the terraces gave him street cred. It gave him a name that people knew, which turned out to be invaluable in the lifestyle that he finally chose, the muscle game. He was known as someone who could handle himself, a hard man, a leader. He wasn't just recognised on his home patch. He got recognised in other areas. Oh, that's Carlton Leach, a man you can respect. It opened doors for him time and time again as he moved into clubland and then inevitably into gangland. He knew now that he was behaving totally irresponsibly with his West Ham infatuation. He was married, had a wife, a mortgage, and yet was still out there getting nicked, charged with threatening behaviour, causing an affray, GBH, and he was under observation from the Football Intelligence Unit. He was even up in court these days before his wedding day. He was in line for some serious porridge. Even away from the terraces, the West Ham legacy was causing huge problems. Carlton was on duty one night at the Penthouse Club when his footballer mate Dave Martin came in. He played professionally for Millwall, but he never held that against him because he was a good bloke. He'd go to watch him sometimes, but only at away games. It would have been suicide to go to Millwall's ground. Too many people knew him. Anyway, because he was a mate, he used to take him there on non-match days for some physiotherapy for a knee injury he got playing football himself. The staff took one look at his tattoo and said, "West Ham? What the f*** are you doing here?" Dave said it's okay with him. They had a bit of a laugh about it. When he came out that night to the Penthouse, some Millwall fans were there and asked who he was with. He said Carlton Leach, the ICF West Ham. They looked horrified, but they never gave it another thought. Dave's girlfriend was the best mate of his first wife's, so it was just a social thing, and he was quite entitled to be seen with him. But the next time he walked onto the pitch, he got a torrent of abuse. "You fucking West Ham supporter, you wanker, you scumbag, Martin." They made his life a fucking misery. so it wasn't surprising that he soon got a transfer to Wimbledon. He went to watch him play there, neutral territory, but still got into bother as they were drinking in the players' bar. Some Crystal Palace supporters were there and started slagging off West Ham. He kept his tongue for Dave's sake, but then Carlton couldn't take it anymore. They were rubbishing his beloved West Ham, and he had to fight them. A big ruck kicked off, and Dave Bassett, the Wimbledon manager, was right in the middle trying to calm everything down. That was the strength of his feelings. He couldn't even be in a normal, civilised company without jumping to the defence of West Ham with his fists. He revelled in the fear they brought to towns and cities all over the country, the way they shut the pubs and shops down when they knew the ICF was in town, the way a path would clear through 10,000 fans as the 300-strong West Ham mob swaggered through the streets, standing their ground in the face of bombardments from snooker balls, bricks and chair legs, defying the police as they charged him with horses and batons, dragging you off and giving you a good hiding. He loved it. Carlton had gained such notoriety by then that Thames TV did a documentary about soccer hooliganism, which featured him and several other members of the inner city firm. He played it occasionally and winced at seeing himself on film bragging about the violence. Then it was a £50 fine if you got nicked. Now you're talking 6 months for just swearing at a game. The spies from the football intelligence units were everywhere and things had to change. He still goes to the old West Ham game now, but that urge to run amok and scare the shit out of people has long gone. He's got different priorities now. Self-preservation also played a big part in him quitting the Terraces. It was only a matter of time before he got nicked for something serious. He got a tip-off from a copper he knew that Scotland Yard was launching a fucking great anti-hooligan operation. He'd seen an ops room board containing dozens of suspects, and whose photo was at the top? Yours truly. He said, do yourself a favour, Carlton. Knock it on the head. You're going to get nicked for something really heavy. He thought he was talking about charges for conspiracy to cause violence or something like that with a probable 5-year stretch. The geezer did him a big favour. At first you think, bollocks, they won't stop us. A lot of the other lads down at Britannia thought the same way, and they said they'd just carry on as normal. Then one night, Carlton was walking home and he thought, what the fuck am I doing? I've been going 10 years as one of the top soccer thugs. I've had a good run. Now it's time to stop. Carlton took it easy for a while, but then he split up with his wife, and the lure of the Terraces drew him back. He was living in a flat with 3 geezers, who were all hard-case fucking soccer thugs. They were out in pubs drinking, shoulder to shoulder with undercover cops for the football unit. Their flat was all decked out in West Ham gear. They had knives, koshes, and all sorts of tools around the place. It was like Battle HQ for the ICF. And Carlton was up to his ears again, even though he knew he was being targeted. But he knew that his time was running out. So he told his mates one day, fuck it, I'm going home. Another mate just split up his missus, so he took over his room. Just a matter of days after the police stormed in a big Scotland Yard clean-up operation, they thought he was him, steamed into his bedroom and turned the place over. It should have been him, a lucky escape, but another warning, because he'd not been to many matches after the copper's warning. He missed being caught on the surveillance cameras at the West Ham games, so when the police questioned him, they hadn't got anything on him, but he knew it was time to back off. He'd had some great times, done some mad things, but he had to shut the door on all that now. No more trying to be the hardest of the soccer hard men. No more travelling hundreds of miles to challenge one of the top 3 firms for the dubious title of Britain's most feared football hooligan. Carlton couldn't really explain what it was all about, but he remembers well the TV producer who made the Hooligans programme saying on an afternoon talk show, if there was a war, these boys would be winning medals. I think he was right. It's no good sending a computer wizard or a stockbroker to fight a war. If you've got 500 troops in action, you've got to have natural born leaders. People who can inspire that extra bit of courage in the face of danger. Someone's got to get up and lead the charge. That was him in the soccer world. He knew he was a natural leader, and because he was also a good talker, he could get people to follow him. Even though his arse was pounding, he'd go in first. Come on, you we can do this lot. And Carlton knew they would be right behind him. Carlton was a general on the terraces with troops who would probably have been a credit to the nation on a battlefield. But because their arena was football, because they were seen to be wrecking the nation's favourite sport, they were deemed to be the lowest of the low. But those same boys will go and win you wars. And if the world suffered a major catastrophe, They were left without power, food, all the basic commodities that they take for granted. Who would you depend on then? Who would be the survivors and who would be the providers? Who would know how to go out with a fucking great Bowie knife, catch an animal, skin and cook it over an open fire? He'd be out there doing that, and so would most of the fucking people who were condemned as brainless morons for soccer violence. 90% of the population would be fucked if they couldn't pop out of Sainsbury's or Tesco's. Life is about survival, and football taught him about survival. He learned about sticking together, trusting each other, inspiring people to beat the odds. It's all double standards in polite society. Put two boxes in a ring and people will pay £100 a ticket to watch them knock f*** out of each other, even to the point of a coma. But if you walk up to another football fan who's wearing a different scarf and punch him in the face, he's a dangerous hooligan who should be locked up. Carlton's passion for West Ham as a football team never really waned. His whole mood for a week could be determined by the West Ham result. If Carlton watched them on Sky TV getting beaten by one of the teams he hated, he wouldn't talk for a day. If anyone spoke to him, he could as easily thump them as give a reply. One of the funniest things about the Hooligan days was the collection of regional accents he built up. As part of their cover, they practiced Scouse, Brummie, Geordie, all sorts of accents to help them penetrate the opposition. He can still do a passable "Hooligan lads" that fooled a good few Newcastle fans. Not exactly Rory Bremner, but not bad when you consider his normal accent is about as Cockney as Alf Garnett. There were a lot of laughs among the kick-ins, the brickbats, the bottles and the knife-ins. They were coming back to London by train one night from a Newcastle game, and they had a drink and decided to break into the buffet car, as you do. The alarm went off, but the driver didn't want to stop with a bunch of football hooligans on board, so he carried on towards King's Cross. By now, a fucking great food fight had broken out. There were like bits of chicken, sandwiches, crisps, nuts, all sorts of grubs being fucking lobbed about, and the lads had got stuck into the bar, sloshing down beers and spirits. But their lot were in a really good mood, so they were going through the carriages, handing out snacks and drinks free to everyone on board. There were like old age pensioners, Australians, some business types, and they hadn't a fucking clue what was happening. The boys were going down the train like waiters saying, "What would you like, love? Nice gin and tonic or a nice port and lemon?" Then they found some half bottles of champagne and popped them open and were giving bubbly to everybody. Then came the cigars and cigarettes. They were lighting them up for the old boys and pouring them large brandies. By the end of the journey, they had half of them pissed. The old dears were saying, "Oh, aren't they lovely boys? Their mums must be really proud of them." As they approached King's Cross, the old bill were gathering. They were saying to each other, "Don't walk off with anything, leave it all on the train." They'd had a good drink and a good feast, so they didn't want any more. But a couple of other passengers couldn't resist filling up their bags with the nick goodies and wallop. The old bill was on them, and they all got done for theft. Nothing to do with West Ham. They walked past shouting "Wonders," having a right laugh. The police weren't at all amused when they walked into the buffet car and found it littered end to end with food and bottles, and realised that all they'd nicked were a couple of pissed pensioners on their way home from a day trip to Doncaster.